My life was measured in commission checks and caffeine, a frantic race against deadlines that only ever seemed to draw nearer. My only sanctuary was a 10 by 20-foot stretch of grimy asphalt behind our gleaming glass office tower. The alley was my church, my confessional, the only place where the relentless hum of the sales floor faded into the background roar of the city. It smelled of damp concrete and garbage, but to me, it smelled like freedom. That's where I first truly saw her. I'd noticed her before, of course, like spotting a piece of modern art in a busy lobby, a fleeting impression of elegance and stillness. She worked for the data analytics firm on the 14th floor, a space I imagined filled with the soft clicking of keyboards and the hushed reverence of a library. She was the absolute antithesis of my world. She never spoke. She'd stand near the brick wall, posture perfect, nursing a single slender cigarette as if it were a flute of champagne. Her dark, glossy hair was cut into a sharp bob that framed a face of quiet intensity. You could tell she wasn't shy, not really. It was a deliberate reserve, a choice to observe rather than participate. For weeks, we shared the alley in shifts, 2 planets in a silent, predictable orbit. I'd burst out, loud and frazzled, complaining into my phone, while she'd be leaving, a ghost of a smile on her lips. Or I'd find the space empty, save for the lingering, clean scent of her perfume, a stark contrast to the alley's usual grime. Then one Tuesday, the universe nudged our orbits closer. My lighter died mid-click, a pathetic spark fizzling out. A curse bubbled up when a soft sound cut through my frustration, the flick and catch of a vintage silver lighter, its flame a steady, warm gold in the gray afternoon light. I looked up. She stood there holding it out. Her gray eyes, which seemed to absorb the light, met mine directly. No artifice, just a simple, clear offering. "Thanks," I managed, my voice rougher than usual. I leaned in, letting the flame kiss the tip of my cigarette. For a split second, the world narrowed to the space between us. The warmth of the flame, the intricate scrolling on the lighter's silver casing, the long lashes that shadowed her eyes. I inhaled, the familiar burn a welcome anchor. When I straightened, I expected her to retreat. She didn't. She stood there, lighter still open in her palm, watching me with that unnerving, placid calm. "Catherine," I said, extending a hand out of habit. It felt like I had to fill the silence. After all, it was my job. She looked at my hand, then took it. Her grip was cool and firm. "Lorelei." Her voice was exactly as I'd imagined, low, smooth, and utterly free of wasted energy. One word, but it held a world of meaning. She let go, snapped the lighter shut with a satisfying click, and turned back to her spot against the wall, leaving me feeling like I'd been handed a secret I didn't know how to read. After that first exchange, something shifted. The alley was no longer just an escape. It became a destination. My afternoon slumps suddenly had purpose. I'd find any excuse to slip away around 3:15, knowing with strange certainty she'd be there. It was our unspoken appointment. I did all the talking, of course, it's what I do. I filled the brick-walled space with stories of my overbearing boss, my disastrous weekend date, the absurdity of our quarterly sales targets. I paced and gesticulated, my cigarette a prop in my one-woman show. Lorelei listened. She'd lean against the wall, one ankle crossed over the other, and watch me, her focus absolute. It wasn't passive hearing, it was active, intense listening. She never interrupted, never offered platitudes. Sometimes, a particularly ridiculous story earned a faint upward curve of her lips. A single raised eyebrow from her said more than a 5-minute monologue from a colleague. I learned to read her in subtleties. A slight tilt of her head meant intrigue. A slow exhale of smoke meant she was processing. I started tailoring my stories not to impress, but to earn one of those rare, genuine smiles. It became a game, a challenge I set for myself. One rainy afternoon, I rambled about my attempt to assemble Swedish furniture. I'm telling you, Lorelei, the instructions were written by someone who hates humanity. Pictures, no words, like trying to read hieroglyphics. I ended up with something that looks like a lopsided bookshelf and 3 screws I'm pretty sure keep it standing. I looked over, expecting quiet amusement. Instead, her brow furrowed. She finished her cigarette, dropped it, and crushed it neatly with her boot. "The Allen key," she said, her voice clear in the still air. "They always hide its diagram on the back of the packaging foam." I stared. It was the first unsolicited information she'd ever offered, practical, precise, and I realized with a jolt, probably correct. She held my gaze for a moment, a flicker of amusement in her gray eyes, then nodded and headed back to the building's service door. I was left alone with my lopsided bookshelf and a stunning realization. She was paying far closer attention than I'd thought. The Allen key incident was a turning point. It was as if she'd handed me a coded piece of her language. I saw her not just as a silent observer, but as a puzzle I ached to solve. My alley monologue shifted from venting to offering. I'd talk about a book I was reading or a work problem, secretly hoping for another of her laser-focused insights. The real breakthrough came a week later. I was losing a major account with Finch Analytics, run by the notoriously unyielding CEO Alastair Finch. Finch cared only about data, metrics, and quantifiable results, and my usual charm and conviction routine bounced off him like rubber. "He's a brick wall," I complained, kicking a loose pebble. "He sends back my proposals with one note: insufficient predictive modeling. I sell software, not a crystal ball." I was talking to myself as much as to her, frustration bitter on my tongue. I lit a cigarette and took a calming drag. "Finch Analytics," Lorelei said, so quietly I almost missed it. I turned. "What?" "Alastair Finch. His company is our biggest client." She stared at the alley wall, as if studying its cracks. "He doesn't care about your software's current capabilities. He cares about its potential for data integration. His entire business model relies on acquiring small data streams to predict market trends." She finally looked at me. "He's not buying what your product is. He's buying what it could be for him." The air rushed out of my lungs. In 2 sentences, she'd handed me the key. She hadn't just listened. She'd cross-referenced my problem with her world, analyzed it, and delivered a solution with surgical precision. All my bluster, all my sales strategies, were worthless without this critical context. "How did you?" I trailed off. "I analyzed their data streams all day," she said with a small shrug, as if it were obvious. "He's not difficult. He's just specific." I looked at her, really looked. The quiet woman in the alley wasn't just a refuge from my loud life. She was brilliant. A wave of respect washed over me, almost dizzying. This wasn't just a pretty face or a calm presence. This was a sharp, deep mind hidden behind silence. For the first time, I felt an intense, undeniable need to know more. To know everything. Armed with Lorelei's insight, I rewrote my entire proposal. I spent 2 days buried in research, learning the language of predictive modeling and data integration. I sent it off, my heart pounding. 24 hours later, I had a signed contract and a glowing email from my boss. I practically floated down to the alley that afternoon. She was there, smoke curling lazily from her cigarette in the windless air. "You were right," I said, skipping preamble. "Completely right. I got the account." A genuine smile bloomed on her face, transforming her expression, like watching the sun break through clouds. "I'm glad," she said simply. Gratitude swelled in my chest. "A thank you felt inadequate." She'd seen my struggle and offered not sympathy, but a solution. Before I could overthink it, I blurted out, "Let me buy you coffee. Or a drink. Dinner, whatever you want." To say, "Thank you." The smile vanished, replaced by guarded stillness. Her gaze dropped to the ground. The alley's comfortable silence suddenly felt heavy with tension. I'd crossed a line, pushed our unspoken rules too far. Regret tightened my chest. I was about to backtrack, laugh it off as a joke, when she looked up. Her gray eyes searched mine, as if scanning for hidden motives in sincerity. I held her gaze, projecting only the truth. I wanted more time. More of this. More of her. Seconds stretched on. A distant siren wailed. I held my breath. Okay, she whispered, the word almost carried away by the wind. Coffee would be nice. Relief washed over me, lightheaded and warm. It was just one word, same as before, but this time, it felt like a door creaking open. We went to the Daily Grind, a coffee shop a few blocks from the office. Far from its name, it was warm wood, soft lighting, and the rich scent of roasted beans. The low murmur of conversation and clink of mugs felt a world away from the alley. Sitting across from her in a cushioned booth, I felt exposed. Without brick walls and cigarettes, our dynamic was new, undefined. She seemed to feel it too, holding her mug with both hands, shoulders slightly tense. So, I began, my voice too loud in the cozy space. Data analytics. Is it as exciting as it sounds? I cringed immediately. A small smile touched her lips. It's orderly, she said. I like finding patterns in chaos. It makes sense. People don't always make sense. The statement hung in the air, a window into her worldview. My job relied on people's illogical, emotional nature. Hers proved they were just predictable data points. I'm the chaos, I admitted with a laugh. My life is barely averted disasters held together by caffeine and blind optimism. I know, she said, no judgment, just fact. It made me feel seen, unsettling, and appealing all at once. I see your sales reports. Your numbers are erratic, but your growth curve is consistently aggressive. It's a fascinating pattern. I was floored. You read my sales reports? They're part of a shared dataset, she explained, a faint pink rising in her cheeks. Analyzing interdepartmental metrics is part of my job. For anyone else, it would have been a dry corporate explanation. For her, it was a confession. She hadn't just listened to my alley stories. She'd studied the data of my life, the patterns I didn't notice. It should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt intimate. She knew the curated professional me and the rambling, unfiltered me, and she was still here. Coffee became a new ritual, an addition to our alley meetings. On nice days, we'd skip the shop and walk, exploring the small green spaces tucked between skyscrapers. During these walks, something remarkable happened. I started talking less. At first, silence felt like a void to fill, but Lorelei's presence was different. She didn't need entertainment. She was content to just exist in the same space. Slowly, I learned to be quiet with her. I noticed things I'd missed in my rush. Late afternoon sun filtering through tree leaves, the intricate pattern of a wrought iron fence, a distant saxophone melody. Lorelei moved through the world with quiet reverence, and being with her felt like being let in on a secret. One evening, we walked along the riverfront as the sun set, painting the sky orange and purple. The path was crowded with joggers and tourists. To avoid a couple pushing a stroller, I sidestepped quickly, my arm brushing hers. It was a fleeting contact, nothing more, but it sent a warm spark up my arm. I pulled back slightly, glancing at her. She stared ahead, but I saw her swallow a small, almost imperceptible movement. The space between us, once filled with my words, hummed with unspoken energy. For the rest of the walk, I was acutely aware of the inches separating us, a magnetic pull I had to resist. When we reached the subway station where we parted, my usual breezy "see you tomorrow" caught in my throat. "Good night, Catherine," she said softly. "Good night, Lorelei," I replied. I watched her descend the stairs, her dark hair disappearing into the crowd. My arms still tingled. For the first time, I admitted to myself, my curiosity about the quiet woman from the 14th floor had grown into something far more complicated. The sky threatened rain all day, a heavy gray blanket over the city. We left the office, deciding to walk despite the clouds, tempting fate, as it turned out. The rain hit without warning, not a drizzle, but a violent downpour. Streetlights blurred as sheets of water slammed into the pavement. We were soaked in seconds. Laughing, I grabbed her hand, spontaneous, instinctual, and pulled her toward the nearest shelter, the doorway of a closed, old bookstore. We huddled under the faded green awning, catching our breath as the storm raged around us. The world outside was chaos, drumming rain, splashing cars, but in our little alcove, it was quiet. Water dripped from my hair and hers. Her white blouse was dampened by the rain, clinging softly but modestly to her frame. She stood close, and I could feel the warmth of her presence against the cold, damp air. The scent of rain on asphalt mingled with her subtle, clean perfume. My heart hammered against my ribs, a counterpoint to the rain. The city faded away, leaving just the two of us. All my words, all my defenses, felt useless. There was nothing to do but stand there, caught in her gaze. She reached up, her fingers cool against my cheek, and brushed away a drop of water. It was a gentle, wordless gesture, but it grounded me, making the surreal moment real. Her hand lingered for a beat, then fell back to her side. It wasn't a gesture of friendship. It was something deeper, something I wasn't fully prepared for, but didn't want to resist. The next morning, the memory of the bookstore doorway felt like a secret, warm and precious. The air between us was charged. A glance in the elevator, a brief eye contact in the hallway, all felt meaningful, ours alone. But secrets in a glass tower don't stay hidden long. I was grabbing coffee from the break room when Mark from accounting cornered me. Mark thrived on gossip, on prying into other people's lives. "So, Catherine," he said, leaning against the counter with a smug grin. "Saw you, and the 14th floor mute getting cozy in the rain. Didn't know you went for the weird, silent types. Must be a change from your usual loud crowd." Anger flashed hot. I gave him my iciest client smile. "Mark, I didn't know you made a hobby of staring at strangers in storms. Kinda creepy, don't you think?" He laughed it off, but the damage was done. The comment wasn't overtly cruel, but the tone, insinuating we were something to gawk at, something unusual, stung. I brushed it off, but a knot of unease tightened in my stomach. I was used to attention, but I was fiercely protective of the quiet world Lorelei and I were building. Later, I saw her at the water cooler. She was filling her bottle, back to the room, but her shoulders were rigid. As I approached, I heard snippets of conversation from a nearby cubicle. So weirdly quiet all the time. And Catherine's little project. I knew she'd heard. When she turned, her face was a polite blank. The warmth, the vulnerability from the rain, was gone. She gave a small, tight nod and walked away without a word. That afternoon, for the first time in weeks, she wasn't in the alley. The space felt hollow, mocking me with its emptiness. My 3:15 break, once the highlight of my day, became a painful reminder of what I'd lost. I stood there, smoking a cigarette I didn't want, staring at the spot where she used to lean. Work became a blur. The Finch account, my big win, felt hollow. The thrill of closing deals was gone, replaced by a dull ache. I threw myself into calls and meetings with manic energy, trying to outrun the silence she'd left behind. It didn't work. Her absence was a ghost that followed me everywhere. I tormented myself. Had I pushed too hard? Was coffee, walks, the moment under the awning too much, too fast? Or was it the gossip? Had my colleagues' casual cruelty shattered the trust we'd built? A proud, stubborn part of me wanted to let it go. She was an adult. If she wanted to see me, she'd find me. But a bigger part knew it was my fault. I'd pulled her out of her quiet orbit into my chaotic world, exposed her to my loud, judgmental colleagues, and they'd hurt her. Nights were restless. I lay awake, replaying every conversation, every glance, every silence, searching for where it had gone wrong. The memory of her hand on my cheek in the rain was a sharp, persistent ache, a promise that now felt out of reach. On the fourth day, I couldn't take it anymore. Pride was useless. The thought of never sharing a quiet moment with her again, never seeing that rare smile, was unbearable. I had to find her. Finding Lorelei wasn't easy. She'd mastered invisibility, slipping through the corporate world unseen. I realized I had to think like her, look for quiet, forgotten corners, not loud, public spaces. I found her in the corporate library on the 27th floor. It was a sterile, an used room filled with outdated business journals and thick financial binders. She sat at a table in the far corner, a book open in front of her, but she wasn't reading. She stared out the window at the gray city skyline. She didn't seem surprised to see me. She watched me approach, expression unreadable. I pulled out the chair opposite her and sat down. The scrape of metal on polished floor sounded like a gunshot in the silence. My planned apologies, justifications, speeches, they evaporated. Faced with her calm stillness, words felt cheap and clumsy. So I spoke the truth, raw and unadorned. "The alley is too quiet without you," I whispered. Her gaze didn't waver. She didn't offer excuses. She just waited, letting my words hang in the air. "I miss our conversations," I continued, a lump in my throat. Even when I was the only one talking. I miss you." It was the most vulnerable I'd felt in years. No sales pitch, no angle, just me, stripped of armor. I braced for rejection, for a polite but firm dismissal. She closed her book, the soft thud echoing. Her hands rested on the cover, still and calm. "I know," she said, her voice low and steady. "I've missed them too." And then she told me why she disappeared. "My family," she began, gaze drifting back to the window, "values things that can be measured. Test scores, degrees, promotions. Emotions are inefficient variables." She spoke in her usual calm tone, but I heard a faint undercurrent of old hurts. She described a childhood in quiet rooms, where praise was reserved for academic success and emotional moments were met with baffled disappointment. She wasn't neglected, but she was taught her quiet, observant nature was a flaw to fix, not a strength to embrace. "I had a partner in college," she said, voice dropping. "He was a lot like you, full of life, always the center of attention. At first, it was wonderful. He brought me out of my shell." A shadow crossed her face. "But then he started trying to fix me. He hated my silences, complained he never knew what I was thinking. He wanted me to be loud, expressive like him. He didn't understand my feelings were just as strong. They just had a different way of showing." The relationship ended, leaving her with a deep fear that she was fundamentally lacking, that her quietness was a wall no one would climb. "When I heard those people talking," she said, finally looking at me, eyes filled with pain. It was like hearing his voice again. "Catherine's new project. As if I wasn't a person, just a puzzle for you to solve." I panicked. I thought if I pulled away, I could protect you from the criticism and protect myself from the inevitable. "The inevitable what?" I whispered. "The moment you get tired of talking to a brick wall," she said, self-deprecation lacing her words. "The moment you'd realize I wasn't enough." Her words hit me like a physical blow. All this time, I thought I was offering her excitement, a break from quiet. I never imagined she saw me as someone she had to live up to. "Lorelei," I said, voice thick with emotion. "You were never the brick wall. You were the foundation. I was the one talking, but you were the one listening. You're the most enough person I've ever met." A single tear slid down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away, just let it fall, a quiet acknowledgement of pain held too long. We left the library and, without a word, walked back to our alley. Late afternoon sun cast long shadows, and the air was cool and clean after morning rain. It felt like coming home. I lit a cigarette, the familiar ritual comforting. I was about to launch into a speech. Promises to protect her, declarations that she was perfect as she was, but before I could speak, she moved. She stepped closer, closing the gap between us. She gently took the cigarette from my fingers and set it on a nearby window ledge. Then she laid her hand on my arm, a simple, silencing gesture. Warm, definite. My heart stopped. My overactive brain went blank. All plans, all words, dissolved. She looked up at me, and in her gray eyes, there was no fear, no hesitation, only quiet strength, a decision made. She'd spent her life analyzing patterns, and in this moment, she was breaking one. Slowly, deliberately, she rose on her toes. The world slowed down, every detail sharp, The faint scent of her perfume, the soft texture of her coat under my hand, the way her dark hair framed her face. Then her lips met mine. It wasn't hesitant. It was a statement, brief, soft, and heavy with every unspoken word, every shared silence, every moment that had led us here. It reversed our dynamic. I, the talker, the pusher, was rendered speechless. She, the quiet observer, had made the most definitive move of all. When she pulled back, her eyes searched mine for a reaction. I could only stare, mind reeling, heart restarting with a joyous jolt. The alley, our sanctuary, had witnessed a conversation that needed no words. The days that followed felt like learning a new language, grammar of shared glances, vocabulary of small, significant touches. A conversation could unfold in an elevator ride, her fingers brushing mine, my smile in response, quiet understanding passing between us. The office hadn't changed. Whispers lingered, maybe even grew louder. But we had shifted, no longer separate entities but a unit. One morning, walking from the lobby to elevators, she slipped her hand into mine. It was a bold, simple act in the middle of the glass tower. I saw Mark from accounting's eyes widen as he passed. I felt stares, but when I looked at Lorelei, her gaze was forward, jaw set with quiet determination. She wasn't hiding anymore. I squeezed her hand, a silent promise she'd never have to. Our alley time continued, but it was different. The space wasn't filled with my chatter. We stood in complete silence, the quiet now a comfortable blanket, not a void. She leaned against the wall. I stood beside her, shoulders occasionally touching. We watched the city breathe, perfectly content. She shared more of herself, not in long monologues, but small, thoughtful offerings, a link to an article she knew I'd like, a book left on my desk with a sticky note. Page 47. Reminded me of your Finch problem. In turn, I learned to listen deeper, to find meaning in her pauses. I discovered her quietness wasn't absence of thought, but abundance. She filtered the world, speaking only when she had something essential to say. She taught me the power of observation, the economy of words. I was still loud, energetic, a little chaotic, but a new, quieter part of me grew, nurtured by her calm. The invitation came like a summons. My parents are having their anniversary dinner on Saturday, Lorelei said one afternoon, tone carefully neutral. They want to meet you. Terror jolted through me. Meeting the people who'd shaped her pain, who saw emotions as inefficient variables, felt like walking into a lion's den. But I saw the plea in her eyes for support. I'd love to, I said, forcing confidence I didn't feel. Their home was exactly as I'd pictured, immaculate, orderly, silent. Her parents were polite in a cool, academic way. Her father, a retired professor, grilled me on quarterly growth and market volatility. Her mother, a pristine woman with Lorelei's gray eyes, watched me with analytical intensity, as if categorizing me. Dinner conversation was a minefield of veiled criticism aimed at Lorelei. Lorelei was always so focused on her books, her mother said, glancing at me. It's surprising she has time for distractions. I watched Lorelei shrink in her chair, shoulders hunched, voice barely audible. I wanted to scream, to defend her, but this was her battle. Instead, I became her anchor. Under the table, I found her hand and held it. Her fingers tightened around mine, a quiet show of resolve. When her father scoffed at my career, sales, isn't that a bit unstable for someone like Lorelei? I didn't defend myself. I smiled and said, it's taught me the most valuable things can't be measured on a spreadsheet. I glanced at Lorelei, a silent message passing between us. We left as soon as politely possible. In the car, she was silent for a long time, streetlights flashing across her tense jaw. Thank you, she finally said, voice thick, for not fighting for me. You don't need anyone to fight for you, I said softly. You just need someone in your corner. She turned to me, eyes shining in the dark. In that moment, I knew we'd passed a test. We hadn't solved her past, but we'd faced it together, stronger. We ended up on the roof of my apartment building, a place I rarely visited. The city sprawled below, a glittering tapestry under a starless sky. Distant traffic hummed like white noise. A cool breeze carried the faint sense of 1,000 lives. Lorelei stood beside me at the railing, shoulder pressed to mine. We hadn't said much since leaving her parents' house. We didn't need to. The shared experience, the silent support, said it all. We watched the lights for a long time. Each pinprick was a window, a car, a story, a vast, chaotic system that, from above, held a quiet beauty, a pattern. I thought of how Lorelei saw the world, finding logic in noise. I used to think love was supposed to be loud, I said, breaking the silence. Grand gestures. Big declarations. She turned to look at me, profile etched against the city's glow. But with you, I trailed off, searching for words. With you, it's quiet. It's the space between words. It's knowing I don't have to fill the silence. A soft smile touched her lips. She tucked a stray piece of my hair behind my ear, fingers lingering briefly. The most important data, she murmured, is often found in the quietest signals. We didn't know what came next. There would be more difficult dinners, more office gossip, more collisions of our disparate worlds. Nothing was neatly solved, no perfect ending. But standing there, high above the chaos, her warmth solid beside me, I felt peace I'd never known. The future wasn't a problem to solve or a deal to close. It was just a space, waiting to be filled. The alley had been our beginning, but the whole sky was ahead of us. The story was unwritten, and for the first time in my life, I was content to let it unfold, one quiet moment at a time.